Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Governor Christie is about 1 minute away.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
see you again.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Governor Christie and Mary Pat Christie, appreciate your attendance tonight. Let us start by the Pledge of Allegiance. Paul?
Thank you. There's a couple of flags here. The one in the back of the room is properly displayed, so if you're able to turn around and render the proper salute, we'll begin this meeting the way political ought to be started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Senator Peter Bragdon. Senator?
Thank you very much, Dick. Former senator, I guess is the best word, up until 2014. Represented Merrimack and surrounding towns in the state senate, also the Senate president. And one of the great pleasures was working with Representative Hinch to finally take down some toll booths in the town of Merrimack. Well, that's something that's been talked about for probably 20 years and talked about, but finally something happened, and I'm pleased to support Governor Christie because we need somebody in the White House who doesn't just talk about things, but knows how to get things done. So thank you for coming out to welcome Governor Christie, and we'll give it back to Dick Hinch.
Thank you, Senator. Friends, this is a very special time for all of us. Our nation is going through a transformation. There are those who believe that we have lost our greatness. I am not one of them. Governor Christie is not one of them. We are the greatest nation on this earth. For me, it is a sincere pleasure to introduce Governor Christie to you this evening. He is a man that shares so many positive qualities, and I'm just thrilled to endorse him. I have known Governor Christie for a period of time. He is a very engaging person. He will answer any question that you give him. There are candidates out there that proclaim to be the best, but they don't answer the questions. If you have a question, ask Governor Christie. You may not like the answer, but you'll get an answer, unlike some who will say to you, it's going to be a great wall. I am so blessed to have Governor Christie and Mary Pat as my friends. It's been a journey because they've been talking to me, and they were eager to get my endorsement. But I have to tell you, Mary Pat Christie, she's the closer in the family. She called me on Thanksgiving Day and she said, Mr. Leader, do we have your endorsement? And I said to myself, she had me at Mr. Leader. Friends, Governor Christie is someone who believes, like I, that there is not a glass half full or a glass half empty. He doesn't look at the volume of the water. He looks at that water as a way to quench our thirst. This is the man that should be President of the United States and lead us forward. Governor Christie, welcome to the town of Merrimack.
All right. I got good news for you guys that I've had 3 days off. You're in for hell on wheels tonight, everybody. I want to acknowledge a few people. First off, my statewide campaign chairman, who has been with me and Mary Pat right from the beginning. He's done an extraordinary job for us. Wayne McDonald, former state chair here. Thank you, Wayne. While we're talking about state chairs, we have the current Republican chair of New Hampshire, Jennifer Horn. Jennifer, thanks for coming. And beside Dick and his wife, we got some great leadership from the House as well, in addition to Dick, the Speaker Pro Tem. Speaker, good to see you, sir. Your wife. And the Speaker of the House, Speaker Jasper and Mrs. Jasper. Thank you both for coming. Appreciate it. And I have a surprise reinforcement from New Jersey that I did not even know was going to be here tonight. This is a guy who, when you have questions about what kind of United States attorney I was, what kind of federal prosecutor I was for 7 years, we were the dynamic duo for those 7 years in the Bush administration. He was the United States Marshal for New Jersey, and I was the U.S. Attorney. I then became governor, and I asked him to leave federal service and come back to the state, where he had been a sheriff for a long time, a county sheriff. Asked him to chair the parole board, because he said, we're going to change the way we do law enforcement in this state. The parole board has been extraordinary in terms of the way they've dealt with the drug addiction problem in New Jersey. And I was shocked to walk in tonight and see this guy, but I'm thrilled to introduce to you former Cape May County Sheriff, former United States Marshal, and the current chairman of the New Jersey State Parole Board, and my great friend. I'm honored he's here. Chairman Plosius. Jim Plosius is here. Man, something's happening. All these people from New Jersey are coming out here. It's really good. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and we're going to have a good evening tonight of exactly what Dick said. You're going to get to ask me questions, and I'm going to answer them. And this is not one of those situations where, you ask me a question, and I give you my memorized 75-second soundbite on the particular issue and then move on to the next one and hope I can get out of here as quickly as possible. That's not the way we do these town hall meetings. The way we do them is you ask a good question, and I'm going to give you a good, thorough, direct answer, because you need to know that. You think about what we've got in the White House now. We've got a guy who just the other day said that the anxiety that America feels regarding the terrorist attacks in Paris and in San Bernardino is not real, that it's a product of us watching too much cable television. He actually said that. Then he figured, well, all right, that wasn't the right thing to say, so he came back and said, well, really it's that I don't watch enough cable television, so that's why I don't understand it. That's what the president said. And then he said, really, the ISIS strategy is working fine. I just need a new PR strategy. I'd probably agree with that second half of that. He needs a new PR strategy, and he needs an ISIS strategy because he doesn't have one. But you wouldn't know that from listening to Secretary Clinton. She was here 2 weeks ago in New Hampshire at the debate over at St. A's, and she said that we are exactly where we need to be regarding ISIS. So here's what I'm calling her from now on. I just, right the first time I refer to her, I call her Secretary Clinton, so you know who I'm talking about. But for the rest of the evening, if her name comes up, she's referred to now by the Christie campaign as Secretary Happy Talk. Secretary Happy Talk. I'm happy to be in the American Legion tonight, and for those of you who are veterans in this audience, first let me thank you for your service very, very much. And I heard Secretary Happy Talk come up here to New Hampshire and say, there's no problem with the VA, there's no crisis. Man, I'll tell you, I've spoken to enough veterans both here in New Hampshire in Iowa, in New Jersey, and in other parts of this country to know there is a real crisis with the VA, and we do not need, as president, Secretary Happy Talk is going to tell you when you're waiting months and months and months to get the medical care that you were promised when you signed up and served honorably in our military, that's not a crisis. Well, I'll tell you, if she were waiting more than 5 minutes for health care, it'd be a crisis for her, I suspect. And you know what? We should not let her get away with this. And let me tell you, if I'm the person standing on that stage next September against her, and I intend to be, she won't get away with one thing. You can be guaranteed. And now we see that Iran is testing ballistic missiles. Any of us surprised? No one who had any, not even a lick of common sense is surprised by this. Everyone but this president and this Secretary of State, Secretary Happy Talk, supports this too. And they believe that, we're going to turn the Iranians around. Now, you heard the Supreme Leader of Iran said the other day that if we put sanctions in place because of their ballistic missile tests, sanctions which we are entitled to do, that he will just accelerate the missile tests so that he can get ballistic missiles more quickly. You know what this is. This guy has taken the measure of the President of the United States, and he knows he is feckless and weak, and that he'll do nothing. And now, even after that threat, he said today, well, we can't quite, or his Deputy National Security Advisor said today, on behalf of the President, well, we can't move that quickly on these sanctions. We have more work to do. Well, so do the Iranians, right? And they're going to continue to work and work hard to get ballistic missiles. And let's remember what these ballistic missiles are for. They are not to shoot weaponry at Israel. They already can do that. These are to shoot weapons, potentially nuclear weapons, at us. That's what this is for. And why would we doubt that they want to do that? For 36 years, they've been chanting death to America. For 36 years, they've been chanting it. I'm old enough, and lots of people in this room are old enough to remember when our hostages were taken in 1979. And ever since that day when they were burning flags, holding hostages for 444 days, and chanting death to America, that's been their intent. And what stopped them in 1979? We replaced a weak, vacillating, hand-wringing Democratic president with a strong, decisive, no-nonsense former governor of a big state. And the minute he took his hand off that Bible on January 20th, 1981, they released our hostages, and they didn't mess with us for the next 8 years. Ronald Reagan did it the right way, and you can guarantee I'll do it exactly that way when I become president. See, what this president has forgotten is the number one responsibility of the President of the United States is to protect the safety and security of the American people. I want you to remember what it was like in this country in the weeks after September 11th. No airplanes flying anywhere in America. The stock exchange closed. No sporting events, professional, amateur, or youth. Everything that makes the heart of this country beat was stopped. And it was stopped because we were scared. And when we're scared, and rightfully scared after 3,000 of our fellow citizens were murdered in cold blood, we tend to cuddle up to each other, protect those that are dearest to us. That's not the way this country can thrive and grow and get better. We need to be risk takers. But you need to know that your government's going to protect you while you're out taking the risk to grow your business, while you're out taking the risk to buy a home, while you're out taking the risk to invest in your children's education. We need to know that the government is doing its most important job, which is protecting our safety and our security. Ahead of anyone else in the world, we have to take care of home first. And this president has forgotten that. In fact, it's probably complimenting him to say he's forgotten it. I don't think he ever understood it. I don't think he ever understood it at all. Here's what you need to know about me, and we'll get to your questions. I was named U.S. Attorney by President George W. Bush on September 10th, 2001. And the very next day, that job changed, and changed significantly. For me, I took the next day off from work, from my law firm, to really think about what my life was going to be now with this new, incredible responsibility. Mary Pat did what she did every day for nearly 20 years at that point. She got up real early in the morning. She was out of the house by 6 a.m., drove to the train station in Madison, New Jersey, got on the train, took the train to Jersey City, New Jersey, got on the PATH train to the basement of the World Trade Center, where she came up those big escalators and walked the 2 blocks from the World Trade Center to her office building, where she worked every day. And I took our kids to school that day. We had 3 at the time. They were 8, 5, and 1. And I called Mary Pat after I got home from dropping off at school and turned on the TV and saw the first building on fire. She told me it was fine. They said it was some commuter plane that had flown into the Trade Center and that she was at her desk working, not to worry about it. So we went on with the rest of our conversation. And while we were talking, the second plane hit the second building. And then we knew it was no accident. She told me that they told her she had to evacuate to the basement of her building, which she did with her colleagues. She said she'd call me as soon as she could. Well, 5 hours later, I still hadn't heard from her. Both buildings had fallen down. There were all kinds of reports you might remember from that day about other bombs going off in Lower Manhattan. Turned out not to be true, but none of us knew that at the time. And then the school where our 2 oldest were going called and said so many of the children who had parents who worked in Lower Manhattan, they felt the need to tell the kids about the attack, and they had told them. So he said, when you come to pick up the children, you need to be prepared to talk to them about their parents. So in the next 20 minutes, I sat there and thought about 3 questions in my head. The first one was, what was I going to do without my best friend? Mary Pat and I had met in college and had been together ever since. Second thing I was thinking was, what do I tell the kids if I haven't heard from her? Do I say, I think she's okay? Do I say I don't know? And how are they going to react? And how am I going to handle that with them? How am I going to try to comfort them? And the third thing I was thinking about was, if the worst happens, am I ready to be a single father? To by myself take care of 3 children, 8, 5, and 1. All those things were running through my head when about 10 minutes before I had to leave, I got the best phone call I've ever gotten in my life. Mary Pat was calling me from Midtown Manhattan, where she and her friends had decided they were going to evacuate that building, and in the basement they found T-shirts, and they wet those T-shirts, and they wrapped them around their faces because you couldn't breathe in Lower Manhattan. All the dust and debris made it so you couldn't breathe, so they put that over their faces, and you couldn't see much either. So they held hands together and they started walking north. And she eventually found a payphone that worked and called me. That night, I went to the Jersey Shore to pick her up. The only way to get off was by a boat. She took a boat to the Jersey Shore, the Atlantic Highlands. And I went down to pick her up, and they kept us about 3 or 4 blocks away from the dock. And as I saw what looked like her walking down the street, she had a blanket wrapped around her, and she was soaking wet. If you came from Lower Manhattan, there was a fire department there at the dock, and they hosed you off with a fire hose from head to toe because they didn't want you to bring the contaminants into the state. And then a generous local department store gave folks blankets to wrap around themselves, keep themselves warm. We got home that night, and one of the early calls we got was from a friend of ours who's part of our parish. Mary Pat had helped her husband get a job after he had lost his. And she asked Mary Pat, have you seen Frank? Did you see him at all today? Did you see him when you were leaving the island? And Mary Pat hadn't. And she said, well, I'm sure he's okay. He's probably at a hospital somewhere. Just hadn't had a chance to call me. Well, we know that Frank worked on the 44th floor of the second tower and he never came home. And the gym in our parish is now named in his honor. Our oldest son's best friend, his dad worked for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of the first tower. No one got out of Cantor Fitzgerald alive. And I've now watched that young man for the last 14 years, and his siblings, and his mom, who's a widow, live their lives without his father. And every year on Facebook, on his father's birthday, his cover page becomes a picture of his dad in a tuxedo from a wedding, looking like he was having a really good time. Big smile on his face. And he just puts one line underneath the photo. It says, "Dad will never forget you." What I fear in this administration is they've forgotten Frank. They've forgotten this young man's father. You'll never have to worry about me forgetting, ever. I live it every day. I live with a woman who went through it and came out alive. We have friends who lost their loved ones. New Jersey lost more citizens on September 11th than any other state in the Union other than New York. And we are surrounded on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis by the people who still feel that sense of loss. We know that that loss doesn't end when we stop talking about it on the news. It never ends. The first job of the President of the United States is to make sure that never happens again to the American people. This president's forgotten that. I never will, because it's part of my life. And I think that's the kind of president we need right now behind the desk in the Oval Office, someone who understands how serious this is. So, now we get to the fun part. You get to ask me questions. I get to give answers. There's only one rule in the Christie, New Hampshire town hall meetings. In New Jersey, I have to have 4 rules. Jimmy knows this is true. In New Jersey, it's a little rowdier. And so I got to have 4 rules in New Jersey. You people in New Hampshire, it's been wonderful. I only need 1 rule. You raise your hand, I call on you. This is not like one of those town hall meetings that I know happen up here in New Hampshire where you have to write down your question on the way in and hand it to a staff member, and then they read it. And they decide which questions the candidate likes to answer and which ones they don't like to answer, and just gives them the ones they like. And then you read the question out loud, and then the candidate answers, and it's a town hall meeting. No, it's not. Town hall meeting is when I have no idea what the question's going to be, and you have no idea what the answer is going to be. That's the real town hall meeting, right? That's the way we really do it. So, and it would be indiscreet of me to name the person who does those town halls that way. To give that person's name would be wrong. So her initials are Hillary Rodham Clinton. All right, so I am ready to go. I'll tell you one last thing. Mary Pat is here. You've all seen her referred to by the majority leader. She is here. Tell you one quick story. When we were early on coming here to New Hampshire in July or August, Mary Pat and I were staying at one of the local hotels in Manchester, and we came downstairs, and I was standing in the lobby, and she went off and went to get herself some coffee. And I was standing there, and the manager of the hotel came up and introduced himself, and he said, Governor, thanks so much for picking our hotel to stay in. Really appreciate you being here. Hope we're going to see you a lot in the next number of months. I said he was. And he said, well, thank you. I don't want to disturb you. And he walked away, but just only a few feet away. And then I just stood there because I was waiting for Mary Pat. And he came back over. He goes, can I disturb you for one more moment? I said, sure. And he said, I just want to tell you, I've seen lots of candidates. I think it's so nice, he said, that you sit here and you wait for your young aide to get her coffee. True story. And knowing that New Hampshire during a presidential campaign can be a hotbed for rumors, I said, she's not my young aide. She's my wife, I swear, it's my wife. And so I've told Mary Pat that whenever she comes to New Hampshire for a town hall meeting, I will tell that story because she likes it, because she gets referred to as the young aide, right? And in return, she told me that she will do one duty and one duty only that a young aide might do. And that since it's time for me to go to work, I'm going to take my jacket off. And she said she'll hold it for me. So that's what we're going to do. All right, raise them up. Who's got questions? all the way in the back. We'll start in the back.
This is a question about defending the United States against foreign enemies. With just one nuclear weapon, the Republic of Iran could conduct an electromagnetic pulse attack against the United States and take down our electric grid. My question to you is, if you were elected president, what would you do to defend our country against attacks like that?
Well, listen, the electric grid is one of those things that needs enhanced, modern protection, which it does not have right now, as you know from the way you've asked that question. The fact is that we have the ability to be able to do that. We haven't invested the money in doing it. That's why, and we'll talk later, I'm sure someone will ask about taxes later, but I've said that I want to stop the double taxation of corporations, which are causing American corporations to headquarter themselves overseas. And the fact is that if we gave a one-time holiday for those companies to bring the $2 trillion in profits from American companies back here, repatriate that money, and tax them at an 8.75% tax rate just for that money, I would take that money, and 8.75% of $2 trillion is a heck of a lot more than 35% of zero, which is what we're getting right now. And we would take that money and invest it in infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean not just roads and bridges and tunnels and mass transit, but also the protection of our vital infrastructure in this country, the electric grid being number one on that list. And so you'd have to do that first. The second way that I'll protect the grid is to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. And if I have to use military action to do so, we will. We cannot let them have a nuclear weapon under any circumstances. So those are the two ways to do it. We'll go in the back, right here.
Taking my question, Governor. I'm going to start off by saying a little bit myself. I'm a member of the Massachusetts National Guard. I've served for 6 years, and for 5 years have also done military honors with the Massachusetts 54th Honor Guard. And throughout this administration, the troops have been cut numerous times. And this past summer, the President and the Secretary of Defense allowed the Army troop levels to be cut back to pre-World War II levels. And I would like to know, if you're elected, what would you do to restore the troop levels? What level would you restore them to? And what year would you try to get them back to a good, sustainable level?
Well, first, let me thank you for your service to the National Guard. Very important. You're right. Let's review for a second what this president has done to the military. As this gentleman said, the level of active duty soldiers in our Army is now lower than at any time since 1940. 1940. We have the smallest Navy we've had since World War I. That's a 260-ship Navy. And he wants to cut the Air Force by 50%. This is unacceptable. And so early on, in May, I believe it was, we came to Portsmouth. And I gave a speech on military preparedness. And that speech and the plan is on the website at chrischristie.com. So if tonight you leave here, you're so excited that you're having trouble sleeping, go to my website. It'll take care of things. You'll get informed and get right off to sleep. It'll be good. So here's what we were very specific in there. No less than 500,000 active duty soldiers in the Army. No less than 185,000 active duty Marines. The Navy, back up to a 350 ship Navy, and modernizing the Ohio class of submarines, which is an extraordinarily important part of something called the nuclear triad, which we all heard about in the last debate, didn't we? The nuclear triad, I'll just leave it at that. And no fewer than 2,600 coded aircraft ready to go for the Air Force. Now, we'll talk more, I'm sure, later about entitlements and entitlement reform. I'm the only person in this race still, the only person in this race with an entitlement reform plan that saves over $1 trillion over the next 10 years, solidifies Social Security and Medicare, and saves money to be able to spend on our national defense. But that's the way we would do it. Not by raising taxes on the American people, but by reforming an entitlement system where we spend 71% of every federal dollar is now spent on entitlements and debt service. We need to invest in our military and to make sure that folks around the world know that the United States is not looking for conflict. But if conflict comes and looks for us, we'll be ready to have it and to end it. and make sure that folks like you who we ask to serve have the right number of fellow soldiers to serve with you and the very best equipment to be able to finish the job. And that's what I'll do as president. Microphone right behind you.
This is actually a two-part. One is the V1 visas for people coming in from overseas and taking new jobs in the USA, and also putting the people that are employed back to work. How are you going to handle that?
Well, first off, I thought it was stunning. I don't know if you all saw this week, that the administration has finally admitted that they have absolutely no idea how many people have overstayed their visas and where they are or who they are. I mean, imagine this. We have become a country that cannot control its own borders, its own population. You know, you start to cease becoming a country when you can't do that. And so the first thing is, I think on the visa situation, one, anyone who comes into this country on a visa must give their fingerprints when they come in. And those fingerprints must go onto a database. And then anytime someone who's here on a visa wants to access any type of significant services in the United States, through the private sector or through the government, you got to give those fingerprints. And if it shows that you've overstayed your visa, you don't leave the place where you are. Law enforcement comes, detains you, and then sends you home. See, to me, it's kind of like Christmas. Hang with me on this. It's like Christmas. Like, let's say, I'm sure a number of you in this room invited some people to your home for Christmas. It would be as if you had them for Christmas, and then you know what happens after Christmas dinner and the opening of the presents and all the rest of that stuff. You lose track of things, right? And so all of a sudden you're cleaning the house back up, you're tired, you and your spouse go upstairs to bed, you have a few days off, you're going out, maybe to a movie, maybe to a show, maybe to a park, wherever you're gonna do, and then all of a sudden it'll be like as if today you went upstairs and said, let me check out how the guest room is. And I didn't straighten that out, and they're still there. Right, you invited them for Christmas. You didn't invite them for New Year's. And so we need to have a country that, once again, I don't want to stop inviting people to this country to come as tourists, to come and be educated. That's good for this country and it's good for those people, but they got to follow the rules. And we have to enforce the rules, and we can't count on good faith anymore, because good faith has gotten us 40% of the 11 million people who are here illegally didn't come over the southern border. They came in on visas at our invitation and then never left. So on the visa program, we have to tighten that up, and we have to stop the madness until we get control of who the heck is in here now. We can't continue to add to those numbers, and that's what we're doing now. We've got to stop that, and we've got to make sure that we go from here a real tight program. Secondly, on getting folks back to work. Here's the problem. I was talking to a guy today. We opened up a campaign office in Salem, and I was talking to a guy today. He's a small business owner, and it's himself and 3 employees. And he wants to provide health insurance to his employees. He wants to. But it's so crazy, the cost is either so expensive or the deductibles are so high that he can't do it. We're having trouble employing people around this country because of the extraordinary federal regulation that's on, from Obamacare to everything else that they do. And you have lots of folks who are saying, I won't go above 50 employees because then I have to comply with Obamacare, and I'm not going to do it. So what this president has done in the name of providing health care for everyone, which also wasn't true. You know, the big lie of the first term was, if you like your health insurance, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, right? And prices will go down. 0 for 3, Mr. President, 0 for 3. And now Obamacare is putting a wet blanket on our economy, because the job creators, the small business folks, like the guy I met today in Salem, is saying to himself, I don't want to have to deal with this. So the way to create jobs is twofold. One, we have to change the tax system. And we should get rid of every one of these special interest loopholes and deductions except for 2. The home mortgage interest deduction and the charitable contribution deduction. Those are the ones that real people use to buy and maintain their home, and to support those charities which they believe need help in helping those folks who are really in trouble in our country. Everything else should go. If we do, we can lower those rates to 28% on the high end and 8% on the low end, and you'll be able to do your taxes in 15 minutes. Here's how much I made. Here's how much I paid in mortgage interest, deduct that. Here's how much I donated to charity, deduct that. There's the number. Multiply it times the percentage. Send the check and be gone. That's going to help to put more money in your pocket, but also take all these special rules and the way they rig our economy for the wealthy in this country has got to stop. We need to make sure that the economy is wide open for everyone, and that the only choices that that you have to make are the ones you want to make. Do you want to own a home or don't you? Do you want to contribute to charity or don't you? Tax system should not force you to be doing anything other than that. And don't forget, by the way, this will mean I'll be able to fire about half the IRS agents, which won't be a bad thing, right? And I want you to just remember the scope of what this president has done. Last year, we don't have the total yet for this year, for this past year, for 2015, but for 2014, they issued 81,000 new pages of federal regulation. 81,000 pages. Forget about who reads, who the heck writes that? 81,000 pages of new federal regulation. It costs now, the average small business owner in America, $10,000 per employee just to comply with federal regulation. And if you're a manufacturer in this country, it costs you $34,000 per employee to comply with federal regulation. You wanna know how we're gonna put people back to work? Not only change the tax code, but do what I did in New Jersey. My first executive order as governor in January of 2010 was to freeze any new regulation from any department or agency of government for 90 days. As president, I would do it for 180. And then I sent the lieutenant governor out around the state with Democrats from the legislature to hold public meetings to ask business owners, what are the regulations that are driving you the most crazy, costing you the most money, the most ridiculous, that are not doing any good? I said, come with your list. They did. And by the end of my first year as governor, we got rid of 1/3 of all the regulation put in place by my predecessor. I will do the exact same thing as president. That's the first executive order I sign as president. And I send the vice president out with members of Congress so they have to hear it, so they know what they're doing to all of you and why we're not growing jobs. We do those things, we're going to grow jobs again in this country, and good paying jobs for people who really need them, to support their families, to save for their retirement, and to save for their children's education. Those are the things that we'll do.
Governor, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool conservative Republican woman for many years in New Hampshire, and I respect your foreign policy ideas tremendously. I have a question on domestic policy, particularly in your own state, but for the nation as well. What will be your federal policy on the environment, given the fact that you've authorized the bear hunt in northern New Jersey and extended it for the past 3 years, much to the opposition of many of your constituents in northern New Jersey?
Yeah, I saw a picture today in the newspaper. Now, some people, I see this guy here with his New Jersey sweatshirt. There's some people here who I know understand New Jersey and know it. I saw a picture in today's paper in Summit, New Jersey. Now, Summit, New Jersey is about 20,000 or so people, a bedroom community in New Jersey, not out in farm country in New Jersey, and we do have farm country in New Jersey. This is a suburban town on the train line into New York City. I saw a picture today of a big black bear sleeping in a tree in the middle of a neighborhood in Summit, New Jersey. What's happened is New Jersey has been overrun by black bears. We've been overrun. They're coming into neighborhoods. They're coming into homes. They've caused injury and death in our state. And I went to the folks who are experts in this and said, what's the best way for us to go at this? They recommended to me a bear hunt. And we've done the bear hunt now for 6 years. And this year, we killed more bear than ever before. I extended it to make it longer because we've gotten more and more reports of bears coming into suburban neighborhoods. Right near our national campaign headquarters in Morristown, a group of my campaign workers went out for lunch one day, 3 blocks from my headquarters. And you had a huge black bear in what's called the Morristown Green, which is a very historic spot in the Revolutionary War times in New Jersey. And there's a big black bear up in the tree hanging out. This is not a place, this is not Sussex County, New Jersey, where there's a lot of wilderness and a lot of farm and a lot of wooded areas. This is a long time developed area of our state. So none of these decisions are easy, but I've weighed the differences, and I believe that having these type of hunts absolutely makes sense. Now, some people disagree with me. I get that. And, you know, I don't say those people are bad people or misguided people. I just disagree with them. And if I get elected to make the decisions, I'm going to make decisions. I'm going to make decisions based upon the best advice I can get and what instinctively I believe in my heart and my head is the right thing to do. So I have to tell you the truth. From an environmental perspective with the bear hunt, I don't know what my federal policy would be. That's a pretty big swath of land to start thinking about, okay? And so I don't have a federal bear hunt policy. I haven't thought about it. And I'm not trying to make fun. I'm being honest with you. I haven't thought about that. But I would not back off for 1 second from what I've done as governor of New Jersey. I think it's been the right thing. I think the majority of people in my state believe it's the right thing and support it. There are some who don't. They protest in front of my house on a regular basis during the bear hunt and ask my kids how they wipe off the bear blood off their father's hands and all the rest of that stuff. It's fine. It's free speech. It's a wonderful country. But I'm not going to change my policy inside the state. And as far as the federal policy, I would rely upon the experts at the Department of Interior and other scientists who could tell me if we do have a problem across the country that needs to be dealt with, what's the best way to deal with it. But that's the way I've dealt with it in New Jersey. All right. Yes, ma'am. Right back there. Yep. You got it.
Hi. I am self-employed, and most of my family is also self-employed, and luckily I'm not self-insured anymore because I'm on my husband's insurance, but I am familiar with how to purchase health insurance because I used to, and my parents are in their early 60s, and they are sort of living the Obamacare nightmare. They no longer have their old health insurance because it was canceled, and they liked it.
They
Exactly.
liked it, but they couldn't keep it.
Exactly.
Good.
And
that on to the president.
their cheapest option is 4 times as expensive. Their deductibles are 3 times as high, and they're now having to prioritize the money they would have put away in retirement to pay for health insurance that is too expensive. They haven't actually used it yet because the deductibles are too high. So all Republicans have pledged to repeal and replace Obamacare. But what is your replacement plan?
Sure. I mean, that is the key question, right? I mean, if you're a Republican in this race and you're not for repealing Obamacare, then it's time to go home. The question is, what do you do to replace it? I bring a governor's sensibility to this, and here's what I would do. I would give every state in the union, all 50 of them, 1 year to come up with their own plan. See, I trust the governors and the state legislatures across this country to interact with all of you and find out what works for New Hampshire. Because I can guarantee that what works for New Hampshire may not work for New Jersey. You know, we're about the same size from a land mass perspective, but you have 1.3 million people in New Hampshire, and I have 8.9 million people in New Jersey. And so the problems here on access to care often, not always, but often relate to distance. How far do you have to go to get to a specialist for the thing that you need to be treated for? How far do you need to go to get to a trauma center hospital if that's what your need is? In New Jersey, with 8.9 million people there, you trip over a hospital every 4 miles. No disrespect to the speaker, but we trip over hospitals in New Jersey like you all trip over state reps. Right? I mean, man, I'm telling you, every time I have a town hall meeting, I was like, this is state rep, this is state rep, this is state rep, this is state rep, former state rep, former state rep, former state rep. Like, amazing. Now, here's the point. It's not just funny, it's actually important, right? Here's why. Because you're going to have direct access to the men and women who are going to make this decision for you. The leadership of the legislature and the House and your individual House member and your senators are people that you're going to see at the football field. You're going to see them at the local deli, at the local diner. You're going to see them at the dry cleaners. You're going to see them all over the place. And you're going to be able to tell them your story, your parents' story. Here's what happened to my parents. Here's what the problem is. And they should devise a plan that works for New Hampshire's challenges. Now, what I would do as president is there's no punting on this, though. You can't just go, no, we're not going to do anything. Every state must do something. that helps to deal with the issue of cost and access to care. But the states should make this decision. I believe that's the best way to do it and the most effective way to do it. There's no reason that one plan should be able to cover what happens to folks in New Jersey, New Hampshire, and Wyoming. I mean, you know, they're so different, all of these states, and the challenges they face are so different. Why are we taking away the magic of having 50 individual states? By the way, I also philosophically believe this because I believe the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which says if the power is not directly delineated in the Constitution of the federal government, it reverts to the states. Well, I've read the Constitution up and down, everybody. I don't see health care in there anywhere. Nowhere is it in there. There's another power grab by the federal government. So there's some things that we probably require going forward that people really like, and it needs to happen. You know, pre-existing conditions being covered needs to happen. In a difficult economy, making sure that young people are covered into their mid-20s on their parents' plan if they so choose should probably continue to happen. But that's it. We should not be having a whole lot of federal requirements, just a couple, and then let the states go off and do what it is they want to do that will help the people of their state. And the best thing is if you don't like it, if it's not working, you have access to those people. Imagine trying to get down to HHS in Washington, Health and Human Services, and try to get one of those jokers to actually change something. When we wanted to go to managed care in our Medicaid program, it took us 2 years to get that waiver approved. It's not like managed care is splitting the atom. It's not like a new concept, right? We wanted to go to that in our Medicaid program. They waited 2 years to say yes. And that's from the governor of a state of nearly 9 million people. Imagine if you're an individual who's concerned about their health insurance, you'll never get an answer. You won't even get a form letter back. But if you're here and you see Sherm or Dick or Sean or any of these folks who serve in the legislature, you're going to get an answer. You're going to get an answer, you're going to get response, and more than anything else, they're going to listen because they're one of you. They haven't been carted off to Washington, D.C. and turned into the strange creature that those folks become. And they get carted off of there. I swear if I win this thing, I'm going to bring New Jersey water down there just so that I don't wind up getting hurt. But that's the way I would deal with it. That's the way I would replace it. A state-based system required within 1 year to replace Obamacare. And I think that would help to deal with some of the issues that you're talking about your parents experiencing right now. All right. Yes, sir, the hat right there, the Navy veteran. He's right up here. Yep, and he's coming with your microphone.
I have a pharmaceutical question. I'm a type 2 diabetic. I have Medicare Part D. I take 2 insulins, fast-acting, slow-acting. 2 years ago, I was paying $125, 90-day supply for each. The following year, it went to $614 each. I did call the insurance company. Their answer to me was, that's the way it is, you got to pay it. Now, I asked the question, if I was illegal, how much would it be? And they told me it would be free. So now, thankful for our VA in Manchester, I now pay $24 each through the VA. What is wrong with our pharmaceutical people?
Well, I would say this, sounds to me it's like less having to do with our pharmaceutical people and the policies in this country which reward folks who are here illegally. I mean, listen, the fact is this, we're a wonderfully welcoming and generous country, but we're being taken advantage of. We're being taken advantage of. And the fact is that nobody here, you know, you hear a lot of folks, you know, chattering class down in Washington, D.C. or whatever, say Republicans are anti-immigrant. We're not. We're anti-illegal immigration. And the fact is that all of us, with maybe few notable exceptions, all have immigrated to this country at one time or another in our lineage. But I know that in my family, they did it legally. They did it the right way. And these are the things that annoy people, anger them, frustrate them about this government. And you have this president and Secretary Happy Talk who say, you know, I told you I'm going to call her that the whole time, who say that somehow that what you're saying is somehow anti-immigrant. That you having to pay for at least a period of time, without your military service, you would have had to continue to pay, I suspect, $600 per insulin every 90 days versus someone who was not here legally and didn't have to pay anything. If you weren't frustrated and angry about that, you know, I'd get you another test that we'd have to see if the blood pressure was actually going in at all, right? So this is why we need to have a president who will enforce the laws. And the worst thing about this administration is the lawlessness of it. You see the president now is going to do something apparently tomorrow by executive action about gun control. Craziness. He knows that he can't get it through Congress, so he's just going to try to do it by executive action as if he's King Barack Obama. He's not, he's President Barack Obama. He doesn't enforce the immigration laws. He allows sanctuary cities throughout this country. I will tell you this, in the first week of my administration, the message will go out to every mayor who is currently the mayor of a sanctuary city in this country. Either you enforce the immigration laws or I will pass legislation to make sure you get no federal aid of any kind to your city. And that's not anti-immigrant, that's pro-law enforcement. This is a president who decided that he doesn't like the marijuana laws, but he's not going to change them. He'll just let certain states who want to have recreational marijuana. Now, no matter how you feel about the marijuana issue, you should be real scared of the fact that a president will just ignore the law. The job of the president is to enforce the law. The executive branch's job is not to make the law, it's to enforce the law. Now, when I took my oath of office as governor of New Jersey, I remember one of the sections was that I swore to enforce the laws of the state of New Jersey. It didn't say, I swear to enforce the laws that I like of the state of New Jersey. There's a lot of laws in New Jersey that I don't like and don't agree with, but if I can't get the legislature to change them, I have to enforce them. That's my job. That's the oath I took. And this is the same kind of thing. So understand what kind of administration a Christie administration is going to be. We are going to enforce the law. I'm a prosecutor. That's my training, that's my background, that's my experience. The law is absolutely above men and women. Men and women, we can have certain prejudices, differences, whatever, but the law is supposed to be what governs in this country. Now, I'll tell you one last thing about my attitude about this. When I was U.S. Attorney, I wound up hiring about 130 or 140 over the course of 7 years, assistant U.S. attorneys in the office. And we would have a swearing-in ceremony for them where they'd have to take an oath. It's a very important, very powerful job, and I wanted them to have that experience of having to take the oath in front of all of their colleagues so that they could look all those colleagues in the eye and swear to do their jobs. Before I would have that ceremony, I would take them into my office, and I had the seal of the department on my wall. And I'd say to the new assistant U.S. attorney, I said, read that seal out loud. I said, why? I said, just read the seal out loud. I'm your new boss. Do it for me. Humor me. And they'd say, Department of Justice. I'm like, excellent. Say it one more time. He said, Department of Justice. I said, right. Does it say Department of Prosecution? And I said, no. I said, your job every day is to do justice. Sometimes justice means prosecuting. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it means exercising discretion. Justice is what needs to be restored in this country. The rule of law and justice, not men's or women's preferences, but the rule of law, and that's what will deal with problems like that and the other ones that I mentioned, and that's the kind of administration I will run as President of the United States. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. On the budget for the government, it's amazing that one issue can shut down the government. And I don't understand why we haven't been able to get back to breaking the budget down in like defense and et cetera, and showing more transparency in where our money is going.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know how you're going to address that budget process.
It's a complete failure of government. Now, here's the thing. I don't care who it is, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. When you close down the government, by definition, you failed if your only job is to govern. Right? I mean, we don't make anything. You're in government, you don't make anything, you don't create anything. Your job is to govern. And then they close down the government and say, we're doing our job. Hell, you are. You got to govern. You got to govern. And so here's the thing. In New Jersey, I've dealt with what they're dealing with in Washington, D.C., split government. I'm a conservative Republican in my second term. Every minute of every day of my governorship, I've had a Democratic legislature. And not close. Like 24-16 in the Senate, 48-32 in the lower house. Not like I switch one or two votes, I'm in good shape. I'm toast, okay? It's Democrat. Now, my predecessor was a Democratic governor with a Democratic legislature, similar numbers. They closed down government, Democrats, because they couldn't agree on how big a tax increase. The governor wanted one of one size, the legislature wanted it a little bit bigger. It's been 6 years now. We've never closed down government once. And here's why. Because I won't permit it. And that doesn't mean like I'm a dictator and I tell them they can't. They could if they wanted to. But what they understand is that we have to work together. And I open my door all the time to the leaders of the legislature, and we sit and we reason together. You know what that means? I don't get everything I want. It's time to grow up, everybody. You don't always get everything you want. And so you got to go to Washington with the idea that there are certain sets of principles that you will not give in on. Like, I'm not going to raise taxes. I've never raised taxes in 6 years in New Jersey. Americans for Tax Reform have now said I've vetoed more tax increases than any governor in American history. So they know, they come to me with a tax increase, I'm not signing it. But on everything else in the budget, I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to talk to them. There's some things we disagree on. I've vetoed Planned Parenthood funding 8 times. They tried to override me. They tried to override me, they lost, so that one's in my column. But there's other things that I've given in to them on. We gotta get back to a spirit of compromise in this country. And the only way that happens is for people to talk to each other. I tease Mary Pat all the time that as governor, I spend more time with people I can't stand than I can count. I mean, really, seriously. There are some members of the legislature and other leadership across the state who I genuinely don't like and don't agree with. And I can guarantee you they don't like me and they don't agree with me. But we do not let that get in the way of business. We don't go out to dinner together. There's plenty of legislators I do go out to dinner with on both sides of the aisle. But I don't let the ones I don't like or don't agree with get in the way of getting the job done. But that takes time. I'm sure that Dick or Sherm or Sean would tell you that the only way you develop these relationships is to spend time with each other, to develop some trust with each other. That when I say something, I really mean it, and I'm not gonna, and even if it turns out to not be the greatest thing politically for me, that if I give them my word, I'm gonna stick to it. And I need to understand that that's the way they'll be too. Then you can get things done, but that takes time. And you know, Mary Pat will tell you, like, you know, I spend more time on the phone with a lot of these folks at very inopportune times than I want to. But as she reminds me when I complain about it, she's like, you asked for this job twice. So there's no complaining, you know, like this is it. You got to do your job. And so that's what we've missed in Washington. And you go back to Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. You can't find two people who had more divergent views on public policy. Yet, the president would invite Speaker O'Neill over for drinks, quietly, privately. They'd sit on the patio, the porch, the Oval Office, they'd talk, and they worked together. Didn't always agree. And they went after each other politically hard. But when the door closed and the people's business needed to be done, they got it done. And that's what I've been doing for 6 years as governor of New Jersey. And this is different. I want you to remember something when you're evaluating all the candidates. These other candidates, these other governors who are in the race, or former governors, they had Republican legislatures the entire time they served. Man, I'd give my left arm to have a Republican legislature for a week. A week! Just a week, man, we'd never sleep, right? We'd work for 7 days, then we'd take 2 weeks off. But man, we would get things done in 7 days that the state wouldn't be able to believe. It's easy. It's easy when you have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. You send stuff down the hall, 95% of the stuff you agree on. The 5% you don't agree on, you can paper over. But 95% of it, you're on the same team. These folks, if they go to Washington, they're not going to know what hit them. That place is tough. And you've got to know how to do these things. I know how to do them because I've been doing them for 6 years. Not all governors are created equally, especially if you want to send them to Washington, D.C. Take my word for it. They're going to go down there and have culture shock everybody. For me, it'll just be another day at the ranch. No different. That's the way we're going to fix this problem. Hard work, willingness to compromise, and willingness to listen. Stop yelling at each other. Start listening to each other, because the people are tired. They're tired of us making empty promises and then blaming the other guy. I'm going to be accountable as president the same way I'm accountable every day as governor for the good and the bad, and that's the way we'll get it done. In the back, yep. There you go. She's got a microphone for you right there.
Thank you for taking my question,
Yes, ma'am.
Governor. I'm one of those angry Americans. We worked for Ronald Reagan, Romney, and McCain. And what has happened, I think that a majority of Americans are angry and frustrated. The biggest thing that I'm angry and frustrated about is the political correctness that this country has been drawn into. I'm a retired civil servant, so I know what it's like to work in Washington. I loved my job. I worked for NASA. We did get things done. So I landed on the moon, helped people land on the moon. But the fact that that person in an apartment in San Bernardino saw Middle Eastern men going at all times of the day and night into an apartment next to hers and seeing boxes come, and was afraid to call the FBI, the local police, or anybody, really angers me. How are you going to get the American people to stand up and look around and see what is wrong? And we all have to take the job of keeping this country safe.
Yeah. Amen. I've been called a lot of things over time. Politically correct has never been one of them. Right? I mean, and so here's the thing. The only way to change that attitude is for the president to change that attitude. This is a president who is absolutely marinated in political correctness. It's part of his being. It's part of who he can't change. Everything's about political correctness. I mean, you know, listen, no matter how you feel about the gay rights issue, I mean, the night that the Supreme Court made their decision on same-sex marriage, and he lit up the White House in a rainbow. Now, listen, everybody. Everybody can have different views on this, and I respect your views. But are you kidding? Like, really? I mean, that's where we're moving to as a country, that we have to have that level of political correctness on everything? I'm going to say what I think. I have been accused of being angry and blunt and difficult and a whole bunch of other really bad words that I don't want to use here. But here's one thing I've never been accused of being: misunderstood, right? I'm going to give you my answer. So this lady asked me about the bear hunt. I think from the way she asked the question, she probably doesn't like the bear hunt. I'm okay with the bear hunt. She's going to hear it from me that I'm okay with the bear hunt. We need a president who not only is willing to say those things, but here's the second really important piece to help change the culture in the country in this way, is then you have to produce results. See, if all you're doing is barking into the wind, then everybody's just going to be like, well, all right, I mean, he says some good things, but he can't get anything done either. You got to be very careful about this. You want somebody who not only can say it, but can do it, and has shown they can do it. And so when I ran for governor in 2009 in New Jersey, and I was a prosecutor beforehand, so folks had no idea what my positions were on some issues, and someone asked me about, well, where are you on the issue of abortion? And I said, I'm pro-life. A number of political advisors in New Jersey said, oh, no, you can't be pro-life because you can't win in New Jersey being pro-life. No one's ever won in New Jersey being pro-life, so you can't be pro-life. And I'm like, but I am. And they're like, yeah, but you'll have to fudge it a little bit. I'm like, no, you're going to have to figure out how to win with a pro-life candidate, because that's who I am. Since that time, what have we done? As I mentioned before, we vetoed Planned Parenthood funding. That's not politically correct to do in a state like New Jersey, but we've done it because I believe in my heart that it's the right thing fiscally for our state, and it's the right thing morally for our state. I stood on the steps of the court of the State House and was the first governor ever to speak to a pro-life rally on the steps of the State House. I did those things because that's what I believe. And that's the way you set an example and the way you turn this around in the country. If the president stands behind the presidential seal and says what he really thinks, and then is able to actually get some things done, you'll stop political correctness in this country because it won't be in vogue anymore. Right now it's in vogue because the President of the United States and a lot of members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are steeped in this political correctness. The other thing that you should really be angry about, that I'm sure you are, and I know I am, is I worked really hard for a whole bunch of these House members and a whole bunch of these Senate members to get them in the majority. And now we have them in the majority. I traveled all over the country, raised money for and campaigned at their request for these folks, and they're not doing any of what they told us they would do. We need a president who will call them out on that, who will say, hey man, you want me to come and campaign in your state or in your district? Then you do what you say you're gonna do when you're standing next to me. And if you don't, the next time you'll see me is with my arm around your primary opponent. They'll understand that, won't they? So that's the way I would handle it. Yes, sir, right over here. And she's coming with your microphone right over this way.
All these stories about Ronald Reagan made me think 36 years ago, my father brought me to see him, and him talking about the 600-ship Navy once upon a time. I had to write my question down. Just about 50 years ago, we took a national initiative in this country, one of the few things President Kennedy actually did to put a man on the moon. And my curiosity is, do you have a legacy or vision that you want to have for a national initiative of a similar sort?
Yeah, of a similar sort. I have a number of things that I think are really important, but of a similar sort, I'm tired of watching people in America suffer and die from cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and Alzheimer's disease. They are costing us a fortune on the back end of life in terms of the money that we spend for health care, and they are ruining at earlier and earlier ages the quality of life of Americans. And so I think that we're not nearly investing enough with the private sector in the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation to come up with treatments and cures for these diseases. These are the big four diseases in America. And they're the ones that are costing us the most money, but also costing us the greatest quality of life. I was at a town hall meeting in Iowa last week where a woman got up and was telling me about her 61-year-old mother who was already suffering from advanced onset Alzheimer's, and that she was having to care for her mother and was willingly doing so, but was so sad about the fact that at 61 years old she had lost her mother. You know, we have the ability, the skills, the intellect, the ingenuity in this country to take these things on. We need to go after them. And it's a smart investment not only to improve everybody's quality of life, but it's a smart investment for what we're spending on health care. Because when you look at what we're spending on end-of-life health care, it's those four diseases. In the main, there's always some other ones, but in the main, those are the ones that are getting us and causing us to spend so much money at the end of life. When we're not improving the quality of life, we're just prolonging life for these folks. And we have to do it, but it's not good for our country, and it's not good for individual families. And so one of the legacies I'd like to have as president is the president who worked with the private sector collectively to get the type of things we need to improve the quality of our health in this country. If we can do that, that's an enormous legacy to leave to our children and our grandchildren, and one that I think would be a great gift to them, and one that would improve not only the success of this country, but the heart of the country as well. So that's what I would do.
Thank you, Governor Christie. My question is slightly related to the first question that was asked. Everyone here in the room, I'm sure, realizes and agrees that ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all those are legitimate threats and something has to be done about them. It's not an easy subject. One topic that I don't feel is discussed enough is cybersecurity. And everyone here in this room has a social security number, and cybersecurity is something that can affect literally everyone, as well as our financial system and our infrastructure. I think it's probably more of a threat to the nation and our homeland than any of those others. What are your thoughts on that, and how would you try to address it? I know it's a big question, but how would you try to address it?
Well, first off, I want to tell you that I empathize with this problem because I am a victim of identity theft. Some joker, found my stuff and published it on the internet. That was like 3 years ago, I think. My social security number, my home address, my home telephone number, my cell phone number. The numbers, I could change, but the social security number, I can't tell you how many tax returns have been filed on my behalf. I'm serious. I mean, I'm getting letters from all over the place with different addresses on them. It's a nightmare. For us personally, it's been and then being in the public eye on top of it, it's been really interesting. Now add to that you're right, it can happen to anybody in this room. Then add to that so much of our life now is on the internet. And we in New Jersey have decided to do something about it. We're only the second state in the country that has set up a separate cyber task force that's funded with state and federal funds to work with the private sector to come up with, to share our information, share our knowledge, and to make sure that we're providing the very best protection we can for our infrastructure in the state, both private sector infrastructure and public infrastructure. Everything from water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants. I mean, think about that. They get in there and disturb the computers that are running a water treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant. You could close down a large portion of my state. This gentleman mentioned the grid before. That's a whole nother issue that we need to deal with. We're getting out ahead of that in New Jersey. I think it's just us in Maryland. Myself and Governor Hogan in Maryland are the only two that have done this so far. But it is something that we're going to have to do jointly. The know-how is much better in the private sector than it is in the public sector on this. And we need to bring our private sector partners in this country into the fold to help work with the government about how we protect these things. Not only 3 years ago was I a victim, but just in the last year when the Chinese hacked into the Office of Personnel Management, which is the department within, or the agency within the federal government that keeps the records of all people who have had a high-level security clearance in the federal government. I was one of them as U.S. Attorney. The Chinese now have my fingerprints and my social security number. And that of 4 million other people who over the course of time, anyone who's had a high-level security clearance with the federal government, whether it's military or civilian, has been subjected to this cyber attack from the Chinese. Part of the other way to deal with this too is we got to fight back. So for instance, it's a foreign power that does this, like the Chinese. I got asked this in the debate last time. What would you do? I said, I would go to our experts and say, what is the most sensitive material the Chinese have that they hide from their people? We know they hide a heck of a lot more. They got a closed society. They hide a heck of a lot more from their people than we do from ours. I said, find out what that is. We got some of the best hackers in the world. Hack into theirs. Let's get it and publish it. Right? And I guarantee you something. The president of China would call. He'd call. And my conversation would be, listen, we could play this one way or the other. You want to go tit for tat? We're better than you at this. You want to stop? Let's stop. Because it doesn't make any sense. It's mutually assured destruction from a cyber perspective, not a nuclear perspective, and we cannot have that. So we need to work on greater walls, greater impediments and hurdles to put in front of this infrastructure. But we also need, and that's why this president, again, they did this to us, the Chinese, he did nothing in response. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know why? Because when we discovered it, it was a week or 10 days prior to the Chinese president's state visit. And he didn't want to punish the Chinese and have them cancel the visit. I'll tell you what a Christie presidency would be like. Okay, just so you're ready. I would not do it 10 days before he came. I would do it while he was here. And then say to him, let's go to Camp David and have a talk. I know you're upset, so am I. So now let's go to Camp David, let's extend this summit an extra couple of days, and let's talk about how we're going to prevent this from happening again. Because I'm not looking to embarrass you or hurt your people. But if you're going to embarrass and hurt my country, then you're going to get the same treatment back. And again, this is the difference between knowing what you're doing and just talking about it. I've worked with the intelligence community. I've worked with law enforcement for 7 years before I was governor, and now the 6 years I am governor. I know how to do this. It's one thing to talk about it and to make big bravado statements about it. It makes us all feel better. Me too. But you know what? If you can't do it, if you can't answer how, and by the way, everybody, I respectfully suggest to you, your job for the next 5 weeks. Every one of these you go to, you get the candidate up there and they say something, ask them how. How? How is the big question. It's the big question. And we need to demand that of whoever the next president of the United States is, because we put someone in who had never managed anything larger than a 30-person Senate staff and put him in charge of the largest and most complex government the world has ever known, and we're shocked that everything is falling to pieces. I don't know why we're shocked. Listen, if we wanted someone to read a teleprompter, he's our guy. That's only a small part of the job. So that's what I would do. That lady right back there. Yes, ma'am. And she's coming with a microphone.
Hi. This is an environmental kind of question.
Sure.
There's major water shortages that are going on in California and in the Midwest. What do you think the federal role is in helping them?
Well, listen, I think that we have to be very smart about the way we use our water resources in this country, and we have to be careful about the role the federal government plays. So, for instance, in the Midwest, I think they've well overextended their regulation of farmers in the Midwest, and in fact, in many ways have made the crisis worse, not better. Now, in California, you have significant drought going on. We need to work on a number of different technologies to deal with this problem over the long term. Desalinization and other technologies that need to really be worked on are something that we need to encourage as a government, because we need to make sure that we have enough water to be able to use for a whole bunch of different purposes. The one thing I'm concerned about with the federal role is I do not want an EPA going into every state and telling each state what to do with their water resources. I think that's a real dangerous game, because again, they tend to do one size fits all. And they don't tend to understand what's going on. I think we're much better off if you have active environmental protection departments in each individual state that are doing water management plans. And we do it in New Jersey all the time. We have drought conditions, which we've had at times in our state. You set out certain rules to preserve water. And when you don't, then you take those restrictions off. And the state has the ability to be able to do that. But over the long term, in a place like California, Arizona, New Mexico, in those places where they've had long-term drought conditions, we have to start working on technologies collectively, public and private sector, on desalinization and other things, to be able to make sure that we do have a supply of usable water, so that the water that is our natural water resource, can be used for drinking and the things that are absolutely necessary for that. But to use water for other uses that we have, maybe we can use desalinization and other things, but we're not there yet on the technology. We need to get there, especially in those parts of the country. Having a continental country means that that's a problem in certain places and no kind of problem at all in other parts of the country. We're not going to be able to move water from one part of the country to the next. It's too expensive and quite frankly, not practical. So we're going to have to come up with technologies that deal with that as well. So that's the two ways I would approach it. But you're right, it's a really important issue. And if you're in California, you're especially concerned about it. It's been a long time since they've gotten any kind of sustained rain out there. All right. Yes, ma'am, right there.
Hi. I'm concerned about the trade partnership against, the TPP.
Trans-Pacific Partnership,
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I work in an industry that for the first time we will recognize benefits on day one. But I also recognize that my industry paid $2 billion in duties last year. How would you fix that?
Well,
or replace them?
Listen, here's the thing. This deal is worrisome. It's really worrisome. The first reason it's worrisome is because Barack Obama negotiated it, right? I mean, seriously, everybody, I wouldn't let this guy buy me a car, right? If he came in here tonight and my friend Wayne McDonald was going to buy a new car, and he said, okay, Wayne, I like you a lot. You're a friend of Christie's. I'm going to take you over to buy a car. And he goes over to the car dealership. The way Barack Obama would handle this, he says, this is my friend Wayne McDonald, and he's not leaving this showroom tonight without a car. Let's talk price. You know, Wayne would leave with a car and no money in his pocket, right? You know that part of TPP is that this climate change agreement that they've now signed over in Paris, which permits China to pollute at even greater levels than it's polluting now till 2030, but puts immediate restrictions on the United States and ties a hand behind our back from an economic perspective, that can be incorporated through TPP. I mean, there are things, this is a 5,600-page agreement that nobody's begun to look at yet in any depth. So what I would say about TPP is this. I believe in free trade, but free trade's got to be fair to the American people. We can't put ourselves at an even greater disadvantage than we're at now. So what I would say is we should not do anything while this president is still in office. Okay, we've got 1 year left of him. Let's take the time. It's 5,600 pages. We should take the time. Members of Congress should actually read it. How about that? And if they're not going to read it themselves, get a, cabal of staff members to read it and summarize it for them so they know what the heck they're voting on. There's no rush here, everybody. No reason to rush, and especially with a guy who hasn't negotiated in a way that's been in favor of American interests, whether it was the Iran deal or any number of other deals that he's negotiated over time. So I would take a deep breath and wait for the next president to come in, and then let's see where we are with the deal. I don't believe that this deal, as currently constituted, is all it's cracked up to be by folks. Second piece on the $2 billion you talked about. This is the problem and the balance we have to find between how you regulate trade in this country, because with every new action, there's a reaction, right? So now this will be good for your company in one respect, benefits accruing to them on day one. But what happens on that $2 billion? And how do we make up for that? And I don't think that enough people have spent enough time studying that and giving an answer to you or to me for people in the responsible positions right now in government to do this. So I would hold off on TPP. I would not move it now. I would certainly not approve it now and lock us into it. I would take the time to study it, have everybody take the time to study it, and let the new president come in and be able to either sign off on it or not sign off on it. It is not a solution to the problem, but my suggestion is to not make the problem permanent. And I think if we approve this now, we're going to make the problem permanent, and no one, there's not a soul who's going to tell you they've read that whole thing in a position of responsibility can guarantee you that it's in the best interest of the country. And until we can, we have no business going forward with it, in my view. All right. Get back over here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. One of the things I really like about you, besides your charm, is that you bring a wealth of executive experience to this, to the office, and which is important. I think you have a decision to make. You would have a decision to make in choosing a running mate. What do you look for in a running mate?
Well, that's when you know you're doing better in the race, when they start asking you about a running mate, right? Yeah. Man, I was up here in July. Nobody asked me about a running mate, not once. So thank you. Okay, there's a few very simple things. I've done this once before in picking a lieutenant governor. When I selected my lieutenant governor, it was the first time New Jersey's ever had a lieutenant governor. We never had one before. So my lieutenant governor is the first. I'm the 55th governor of New Jersey. She is the first lieutenant governor in New Jersey, before succession went from the governor to, and then to the assembly speaker, and then down from there. So here's what I would do as president. First thing is, the person I have to believe in my mind, and I have to think the country would believe that this person could be president of the United States with 1 minute notice. I mean, this is so important, and we haven't always met that standard with the people we've picked, both parties. And so that's the first thing. You have to be able to believe that when you look at that person standing next to me, that that person could be president if he or she needed to be. Second is I'd like to have someone with executive experience too. And here's why. I have a certain approach and a style. You alluded to it as charm. I appreciate that. I want somebody who also has run something so that they can give me a counterpoint when necessary to the way I'm managing. I can have plenty of people who can help me deal with the legislature or the Congress, and I've dealt with the Congress and in the state level in the legislature. And I have lots of people who can advise me on that. I want a vice president who can sit in the room with me after everyone else is gone and say, okay, Mr. President, I know you're thinking this way, but I want you to think about this. And they have credibility with me because they've had executive experience. They have run something before in their lives, and they know what it's like to sit in that chair and make that kind of decision. The third thing is, I want to like the person. Now, you know, that may sound superficial to some, but not to me. If I don't like the person, I'm not going to work with them. Just not. Like I said before, there's plenty of people that I have to work with that I'm not going to like. A vice president, you don't necessarily have to work with if you don't like them. I want to like the person. I think it's important for us to be compatible. That while we don't have to agree on everything, that we have to like each other personally. I think that's important because this is going to be a very stressful, difficult relationship at times. And you need to be able to have that kind of relationship where you can fall back on the fact that you can sit down and have a beer together after all the other stuff is done and talk about your families and talk about anything else that you want to talk about outside the workplace and continue to have that close relationship. Because if you have that kind of personal relationship, then you will share everything with that person. And you need to. Because if the moment comes where I can't be president, that person has to be ready. And the only way to be ready is with information, with knowledge. If they don't have the knowledge, you know, you've read the stories about Harry Truman and all that Truman did not know, that Roosevelt did not tell him because they had no relationship. And Truman gets into that seat for the first time and, you know, God bless him, he did a good job, but in the end, he had to really play catch up. If you have a good personal relationship, you won't be playing catch up. Fourth thing is this. I need someone whose integrity I absolutely believe in. I want to believe and have to believe that that person has only the country's best interests at heart and that he or she will put aside their own personal ambitions and put the country's interests first. That whenever they're giving me any piece of advice or counsel, that it is driven by what they believe, truly believe is in the country's best interest, not what might be the best political move to help their political career when they want to be sitting where I'm sitting. I can't imagine, I've never been a vice president, I've never been a lieutenant governor, I cannot imagine it's easy. You know, I forget which one of the vice presidents said, at one moment I'm nothing and I might be everything. You know, it's a very difficult place to be in, and that's why I think those four factors are so important. Because you need a special person to sit in that job and be ready. And be ready, but be willing to wait. It's an interesting match. You've got to be willing to sit back and let the president take the lead and not undercut the president, but at the same time be ready to step in at a moment's notice for the president. So, you know, people used to ask me all the time, you know, when Mitt was running for president and he was vetting people and I was one of the people who was vetting for vice president, people said, well, you know, is Mitt Romney going to ask you to be vice president? I'm like, would you ask me to be vice president? You know, it's a different kind of personality, and I don't know that mine is the best suited to be vice president. But those are the four factors that I would consider in picking a running mate. You'll notice that none of them was about winning the election. If the presidential candidate can't win the election on his or her own, a vice president ain't going to win it for you. No one votes for the vice president, except for their family, probably, right? I mean, seriously. Other than that, you're voting for the person at the top of the ticket. So don't get conned into this. You have to balance the ticket. You have to do this, you do that. George W. Bush proved this. Dick Cheney and the big 3 electoral votes from Wyoming, which he had in the bank already anyway as a Republican, he picked Dick Cheney because he believed Dick Cheney was the best man to be vice president. That's the kind of choice I would make as the Republican nominee for president. I want to pick the best person to be vice president, and that means the best person who I believe might need to be president. That's the way I would do it.
I come from a family who is currently supporting, I guess you could call him the front runner in the party. I'm still undecided late into the race, but after tonight, I think I have a candidate I'm supporting. My question is, while this person is tearing the Republican Party candidates apart, how would you work to build the Republican Party up?
Well, I mean, first off, I'm not tearing them apart now, right? I mean, you've seen me in the debates. I don't get in arguments with the other folks on the stage. I talk about Hillary Clinton. Man, that's who I got to beat. And the rest of this is, listen, there's no silver medal in this business, okay? You either win and get the gold or you go home. It's not like you're first runner-up in the Miss America pageant. You know, for some reason Miss America can't serve, you don't step in, right? It's over. You go home. And so, first way to do this is don't start. And be careful now, okay? Now we're in the last 35 days, right? So, those people who are now behind me in the race are going to really start. Some of them have started already. Okay, they're going to start telling you all kinds of things and nasty stuff and all the rest of it. I think, you know, if you get some of that stuff, whether it's on TV or the mail or wherever you get it, and then you go to one of those person's town hall meetings, ask them, like, why weren't you saying this about him in July? Why weren't you saying this about him in August? You know, this is about politics now. And listen, Donald is a unique character. I've known him for a long time. Donald and I met 13 years ago when I was the chief federal prosecutor in New Jersey. And Donald had not only a lot of business interests in New York, but in New Jersey as well. And he's an interesting character. People ask me all the time, what's he like in private? Because you've known him all this time. I said, exactly the same, man. He's exactly the same. And so the point in me telling you that is, what you see is what you get. He's not going to change once he becomes president. If you think all of a sudden he's going to hail to the chief and he's not going to be doing the stuff he's doing now, my experience is not consistent with that. Now, some people might see that as an asset. I don't know. I don't know if that's the best way to be president of the United States. I respond to that woman's question before about political correctness. It's about saying what you really think and what you really feel, not what you think is going to get the biggest cheer from the crowd. We all know how to do that. I mean, gosh, I've been doing this business for a while. I know how to do that. It's not about that. And so what I'd say to your other family members is there's time, baby, there's time. And if you've come around to the right candidate, I now deputize you. You can be politically incorrect and still not take yourself too seriously. Okay? That's one of the problems. You know, everything that comes out of our mouth is not gospel, believe me. Gentleman in the back.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, sir.
We're fast approaching a $19 trillion national debt, which is unconscionable. How are you planning to address this issue on an overall basis?
All right. Good question. They used to ask Willie Sutton why he robbed banks. And he said, it's because that's where the money is. So if we're going to deal with $19 trillion in debt, we got to address where the money is. 71 cents of every federal dollar is spent on entitlements and debt service. I want you to hear that now and really take that in. 71 cents of every dollar that we raise in taxes and borrow from the Chinese is spent on entitlements and debt service. And that's with interest rates at historic lows. Wait till interest rates start to go back up. To give you some sense of comparison, someone mentioned President Kennedy before in the NASA example in the race to space, this gentleman over there. And when President Kennedy entered office in 1961, we spent 26 cents on entitlements and debt service. We now spend 71 cents on entitlements and debt service. So that's where we got to start. So the plan that I put forward, it's a 12-point plan on entitlement reform. It's the only plan out there. I presented it in April here in New Hampshire. And I figured, okay, well, I'm going to start the conversation and everyone's going to follow in after this. Not one other plan has been presented. You'll notice every time there's an entitlement reform question asked in the debates, I get asked. Why? Because I'm the only one with a plan. So they say, you know, Governor Christie, you say X. Governor Huckabee says Y. How would you discuss it with him? Then another debate, you say this about entitlements. Donald Trump says this. How would you address Donald Trump? Nobody else has a plan. You know, Secretary Happy Talk says that, you know, we don't have a crisis and all we need to do is raise taxes, kind of her typical response to most things. So let me give you, I'm not going to give you all 12 points because we'd have eyes glazing over here, like, forget it. And we're near the end of the evening anyway, so I don't want to do that to you. But I'll give you 4 and then go to the website for the other 8. But the 12 points have been scored by the Congressional Budget Office, so it's not speculation, and it saves over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. First, we have to yield to a great problem. We're living longer, a lot longer. We got to raise the retirement age, 2 years. Now, I say we raise it 2 years and we phase it in over 25 years. So that's 1 month a year, every year for the next 25 years. That means if you're on Social Security now, it doesn't affect you. If you're close to Social Security, it may affect you a month or 2 months of eligibility, but that's all. But for my children, it's going to mean a lot. And it needs to, because the average life expectancy now of a woman in America is 83. The average life expectancy of a man is 79. I saw a couple of you women smiling. 10 years ago, you were 6 years ahead of us. Now you're 4. We're gaining on you. And this 4-year vacation you were counting on at the end of your life from us, you may not get it. You may be stuck with us for the entire ride. That's a blessing. Well, maybe not us, but just the years are a blessing. Remember, this program, Social Security, when it was put into effect, the average life expectancy of Americans was 65. It was a great deal for the government. You paid up till 62, you drew out for 3 years, you died, and they kept the rest of the money with a little bit going to your family. It was a great deal for the government, not so much anymore. We got to do that. Second thing we need to do on Social Security is we need to means test it. Let me tell you exactly what I mean. If you make $200,000 a year or more in retirement income, that means not your house. This is assets you have saved that throw off $200,000 in retirement income. That means you've got at least $4 to $5 million in the bank. First thing I say to you is, God bless you. Good work. You raised a family and all the rest, and you save $4 or $5 million over your lifetime. Great deal. Second thing I say to you is, God bless America. This is the only country where you could have done that. But here's the deal. If you're making $200,000 in retirement income from your investments, you need a Social Security check? Really? You don't. It's not going to change your lifestyle one whit. Not one. And the fact is, we need to make sure Social Security is there for those people who it makes the difference between rent and heat and food. And there are plenty of those folks who have paid into the system. Now, I know the first town hall meeting I did here as a candidate was at Shooter's Pub in Exeter. Yes, I do town hall meetings in bars. That's been written about a lot now. I do, so you guys got kind of shorted tonight, but here's the thing. We're going to have a lot of them the rest of the month. Come to one of them in a bar. You can't imagine how much better I am after 2 or 3 drinks. I'm like a killer, man. You love 2 or 3 drinks. You're like emperor for this guy. Fabulous, incredible. So I was at Shooter's Pub. This guy stood up and he said, "It's not an entitlement. I paid for it. I put my money in." And I said, "I understand that. Are you going to make $200,000 or more in retirement income?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, then you're going to get yours." But here's the point. The government lied to you and stole from you. They lied to you and stole from you. I mean, this is supposed to be in a trust fund, right? Social Security trust fund. They're supposed to take all your money and they've got it in what, remember Al Gore in the 2000 campaign called it the lockbox, right? You remember that? Here, right now you're saying to yourself, do I remember Al Gore saying the lockbox? Or do you remember the guy on Saturday Night Live who was playing Al Gore say the lockbox? For purposes of tonight's conversation, doesn't make a difference. You can remember either one. Here's what's in the lockbox. IOUs. That's it. They're stealing all the money. They stole it. This is the argument I had with Huckabee at the first debate. Huckabee's like, this should not be placed on the backs of the people. It's not fair. I'm like, I agree. But who's going to do it, Mike? Like, this sounds like my mother. You know, when I used to go to the supermarket with my mother, she'd ask me or my brother to go with her to help with packages, and we never wanted to go. It was boring to go to the supermarket, and then we'd have to carry all the bags, and we didn't want to go. So if I'd say, all right, Mom, I'll go, then I'd go there, and I figure, well, maybe I can get something out of the deal. So I'd say, can I buy that? As we're going down the aisle, she'd go, oh, yeah, Chris, sure. You can have that. And I'm like, oh, great. Good move coming to do this food shopping. And she'd say, all you have to do is go home, go in the backyard, pick the money off the money tree, and then come back with the money and you can buy it. And I'm like, but we don't have a money tree. She's like, exactly. I said to Huckabee, where's the money tree, buddy? I mean, what are we doing here? We have to be honest with each other, okay? The government shafted us. When they had a choice between raising taxes, cutting spending, or taking the money over here that nobody's really paying attention to and spending that, are you shocked to know that those people in Congress took the money from over here? Now, this is why you have a big choice to make when it's me against Hillary Clinton. Because she will say that I'm throwing grandma off the cliff. Now, of course, it's a 25-year cliff for grandma to hit bottom. So it's a long cliff for grandma to go off, but we're not throwing grandma off the cliff. Grandma's on Social Security, she's going to be fine. She's going to say raise taxes. Take the cap off the Social Security payroll tax and have you pay Social Security payroll tax on every nickel that you make. And she'll say, see, this is going to get the rich people. Okay, so's mine, by the way. Right? Because anybody who's got $4 or $5 million in the bank, in retirement's pretty well off. I don't know if you call them rich or not, but they're pretty well off. And they're settled in their retirement. Which one do you trust more? Not having the government ever spend it? Or giving the same government who stole from you and lied to you more money on the promise that this time they swear they won't do it? I mean, to me, this is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. Don't give it to us. I'm begging you. Don't do it. Don't give it to us. They'll spend it on something else. So we need to do that. And we need to do the same thing on Medicare. Raise the eligibility age 2 years, phase in over 25. And for those people who are making $200,000 or more retirement income, right now their premiums are subsidized 75%. Let's only subsidize at 10%. Still get a subsidy, but not as much. You know why? Because you don't need it. And the people who do need it are the ones that we need to take care of, because we do not want them not getting health care or in their later years having to go to emergency room every time they're sick. That's less effective care for them, and it's more expensive, and we're going to wind up paying for it anyway. So that's 4 of the points, and that's on the spending side. Second on the spending side, I did this in New Jersey. I had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget when I became governor. $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. Couldn't thank my predecessor enough for the great gift that he left me. And what did I do? I went in and we cut 800 programs, line by line through the budget, and it stunk. I hated doing it. But I wasn't going to raise taxes on the people of the state who had already been too highly taxed. Every one of those programs had a constituency. I tell you, I got the emails and the letters and the phone calls and the protests. You know, you go up to people and say, cut spending, Governor. Cut that spending. Government's out of control. Let's say, okay, I'm going to cut X program. They go, well, don't cut X program. I actually like that one. But Y and Z, cut those, right? Everybody's got a constituency. You have to close your ears to that. You say, I'm going to make this work. The second side of this, though, it's like an accordion, this debt problem. You can't just push on the spending and cutting spending side. It won't close the accordion. We got to have greater growth. 1.5% economic growth is never going to get the job done. We got to get up to 3.5%, 4% economic growth. If we do, then a lot more money is coming into the Treasury without increasing taxes. And that will help to lower the debt if, at the same time, you're pushing on this side of the accordion and you're constraining spending at the same time. The one thing I can say that this Republican Congress has done fairly well since 2010 is they've cut spending. And they have reduced spending in our country. I haven't liked the way they did it, but they've done it. We need to have a president who will help them finish the job. And let me finish by saying this. I'm not going to eliminate the $19 trillion in debt in a 4 or 8 year presidency. Remember that Barack Obama has incurred more debt than every president from George Washington to George W. Bush combined. He has dug us an enormous hole. And it's going to take us a while to dig out of it, but we got to start making progress for our kids and our grandkids. We have to do it. And that's the way I do it. So you see more details on the website, the other 8 points, so you know that we're really mean business here. None of it's popular, but all of it is necessary. And I'm not looking to be elected prom king, okay? I'm looking to be a respected president of the United States. Now, my staff has told me that I can take one more question. In fact, I think they told me that 2 questions ago. But here's the thing. I'm going to take 2. And here's why. We're having a good time tonight. Second, I want them to know I'm still the boss. All right? I mean, do you guys have any idea what it's like to run for president? Here's what it's like to run for president. I'll fill you all in. It is being surrounded every day by people younger than you. And they tell you where to go and what to do every minute of the day. The only place that I am free from the tyranny of the young is right here in this bench, because unless they turn off the, don't you do it, Charlie. Unless they turn off the microphone, I'm in charge. So we'll take 2 more questions. Let me go this guy up against the wall. He's been standing up against the wall all night. We got to give him a question. They're coming with a microphone so everybody can hear you. I know I'll hear you. I want them to hear you.
How can you fire a government employee?
Oh, man. Let me tell you. You know, that also could be like a lawyer joke. You know that. Listen, it is incredibly ridiculous. I can tell you in New Jersey, we have both civil service and unions. Both. This is like the ultimate belt and suspenders to constrain a manager's ability to be able to do their job. And my view is one or the other has to go. I don't care which one, quite frankly. If you want to get rid of civil service, get rid of civil service, and then your rights are protected by your union. Or get rid of the union and your rights are protected by civil service. We cannot have both. And I'll give you a perfect example of the craziness of this. We had a teacher in New Jersey recently who had been late to work, a teacher, late to work over 2 years, over 100 times. So the school district fired the teacher. The teacher filed a grievance. About 2 months ago, we got the decision, the teacher was reinstated. Now, let me ask you a question. Like, would any of you survive in your job if you were late 100 times over 2 years? And by the way, 100 times for a teacher. So what happens then? The kids show up in the class and there's no one there. Now, my kids would say that's a great day, right? But nonetheless, it's not what they're supposed to be doing. It's ridiculous. And I will tell you, as president, my goal will be to get rid of one of the two. Either get rid of civil service or stop federal and state government employees from being unionized. They don't need it if they've got civil service protection. And so, to me, this is something that even President Kennedy agreed with. He thought this was an awful idea, and it's a terrible idea, and it hurts the executive branch's ability to actually manage the government and be able to fire someone who deserves to be fired, and at times hire someone who deserves to be hired, because it works on both ends. So it's frustrating, but that's the way I would fix it, is get rid of one or the other. And if we get a Republican Congress, I bet you we can do that. All right? Let's see, last question. Let me go to this young man over here. Speaking of the tyranny of the young, here we go.
How do you plan to combat ISIS both abroad and domestically?
All right. Domestically, the only way to do it is for us to increase our intelligence capability and our law enforcement capability. And here's how. First off, to reverse what they did this past summer, Senator Cruz, Senator Paul, and the president, who took tools away from the National Security Agency, said they can't collect metadata anymore, said that was unconstitutional. It was not unconstitutional. Let me make sure you understand what the metadata program is without getting into too much depth. They're collecting numbers, just phone numbers. And they're looking for phone numbers that match up to the phone numbers of known foreign terrorists If your phone number has placed a call to the phone of a known foreign terrorist, then we have to go to court, show probable cause before a judge to get a warrant to get your phone bills and find out who you are. Because right now you're just a number. I don't know who you are. Then, let's say we get your phone bills and we look at them, and you got a bunch of calls. And recently, if we want to then put a tap on your phone and record your conversations, we've got to go back to court again, show probable cause under the Fourth Amendment again to a judge, and then we can get the warrant that we need to be able to record your phone conversations. Every step along the way, there's an independent, lifetime tenured judge to protect our Fourth Amendment rights. If you listen to Senator Cruz and Senator Paul last summer, you would think that we were reading your emails to your spouse and listening to your phone calls with your mother, right? None of it true. Absolutely none of it true. We need to restore those. We need to increase the number of intelligence officers and FBI agents that we have in the country. Because here's the thing, and I got asked this morning on Fox News Sunday. They're saying, well, geez, is a case when you intervene before the terrorist act occurs and then stop it, is that as serious a case as the Boston case? I'm like, well, yeah, it is. In fact, it's a better case because we surveilled the people, we caught them before they killed anybody. Boston is a failure of law enforcement. I'm not blaming the law enforcement in Boston or the FBI or any of those folks, but they would tell you that they failed because the President Bush and Attorney General Ashcroft after 9/11 set down a different paradigm for federal law enforcement. They said it is no longer good enough to catch these folks after they act. Traditional law enforcement is crime is committed, investigate the crime, find the perpetrator, arrest them, prosecute them, convict them, send them to jail. In terrorism, they're already dead bodies. That's not good enough. So the President and the Attorney General told us, myself, Tom is here, who was your U.S. Attorney in the post-9/11 era. We worked together. They told us directly, that's not good enough anymore. We're going to have a president, once again, who tells law enforcement, that's not good enough. Boston's not good enough. San Bernardino's not good enough. We have to do better. And to do that, we have to give the tools to law enforcement and to our intelligence officers that they need to be able to do that. That's the way you protect the homeland. Last piece on that is, yes, there at times will be law enforcement officers and intelligence officers who color outside the lines. Prosecute them. Okay, don't take away the tools. If someone does something illegal, prosecute them. But don't take the tools away from everybody else who's out there doing a difficult and dirty job for us, and you make it harder for them. It's only going to cost American lives. Around the world, what we need to do is to put together a coalition, once again like we did in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. The Europeans now know that they're just as much, if not more, at risk from ISIS than we are. Paris proved that to them twice. The Charlie Hebdo attacks and then the attacks most recently in Paris. Our Sunni Arab partners know they're next. These guys in ISIS are coming for them next. The Saudis, the Jordanians, the Emiratis, the Egyptians. We need a president who they're going to trust. That when I say, as president, I'm making a commitment to you that we will work together and we will carry our fair share of the load, that even if my poll numbers go down after I say it, I'm going to do it. And with this guy, they have no trust, no faith in the fact that he'll stick with it. He pulled out of Iraq, and that's where ISIS is now headquartered. He didn't go to Syria after he said he would, and now ISIS is there, along with the Russians and the Iranians at the president's invitation. And the Cubans, by the way. They're there too now. Our new friends, the Cubans, are there as well. We need to put together a coalition because America can't do this by itself, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't be asked to do this on our own, but we should be the leader of the group that puts together that coalition, that brings the fight to them. We need to do that. If we keep them occupied over there, they got less time to come plan to get us. And be cautious about one thing. News reports, intelligence reports in the last couple of weeks have said that Al-Qaeda is reconstituting in Afghanistan because Taliban is making headway in Afghanistan. We do not need a reconstituted al-Qaeda along with ISIS. The world starts to get very dangerous and very crowded. And you need a president who understands these things and will take the strong steps that are necessary and let the American people know this is our World War III. This is it. It's not going to be a nation state. Not going to be a war with a nation state. It is going to be the war with radical Islamic jihadism. People who want to impose their religion and their way of life on us. We're not trying to impose ours on them. They're trying to impose their way of life on us through violence and fear. And we can't let that happen. So as president, as I said right at the beginning, I'm never going to forget this because it's a part of my life. And when the FBI director comes in the first day to give me my first national security briefing as president, he's not going to have to introduce himself. I've worked with him. Jim Comey was the U.S. attorney in Manhattan when I was the U.S. attorney in New Jersey after 9/11. We've worked together for years. Then he was my boss as deputy attorney general. And the fact is, he's not going to have to tell me what actionable intelligence is, I know. He's not going to have to tell me that he needs the president to have the backs of his men and women every day who are out there doing this job, because he'll know I will. And that's the kind of cooperation we need between the White House and law enforcement and the intelligence community. And if we rebuild our military in the way that I spoke to that gentleman about, then we're going to be able to have all the capability we need to keep America safe and secure, not perfectly safe or perfectly secure, because we're an open society. So we're never going to be perfectly safe or secure. But I'll tell you this, the reason I think Los Angeles shut down their school districts a few weeks ago, and why Nashua did it a few weeks ago, is because they no longer believe the federal government can protect them. So they're going to take matters into their own hands. You didn't see that happen during the Bush administration. They believed that folks like me and Jim and others who were entrusted with that responsibility were going to protect them, and we're going to do everything we needed to do to protect them. I don't think people believe that anymore. And that's what the president doesn't understand. He thinks it's cable news-driven anxiety. You know what drove that anxiety for me, and I'm sure for you? Watching those dead bodies in Paris. People who went to a concert on a Friday night. People who went out to dinner at an outdoor cafe. No reason to believe they were ever going to have any problem at all. And they wound up dead. That means that combined with San Bernardino, when they attacked a center for the developmentally disabled. If a center for the developmentally disabled in San Bernardino, California, is a target for terrorism, then any place in America is a target for terrorism, and we got to get ready. And believe me, with me as president, we'll be ready. That's the way we'll do it. Thank you. All right. So, here's what we do. I'm going to end with two things. First, thank you. Thank you. You know, Mary Pat and I have been away for a week or 10 days from here, taking some time off for the holidays and leaving you people alone, quite frankly. All right? You should be able to enjoy the holidays, too, without us all over you. And, you know, there was a little bit of anxiety when we were coming back up here. We were like, okay, it's like, you know, the 3rd of January. It's a Sunday night. Are people going to actually turn out? I will tell you that we both said, wow, when we walked into this room. We're overwhelmed by your presence here. We really are. We appreciate it very much. I'll end with one last story. In August, when I came up here for a town hall meeting, I did a town hall meeting just like this one. I got done with the town hall meeting. I met with folks afterwards, shook hands, took some pictures and whatever, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, Governor, really love this town hall, appreciate everything you said. I agree with almost everything you said. And I said, well, great, thank you. And he goes, I'm not voting for you. I said, wait a second, you agree, you enjoyed it, you're not voting for me? He goes, no, you forgot to do something. And since you forgot to do it, he said, I can't vote for you, but I wish you the best of luck. He starts to walk away. I go, come on, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, come back here for a second. At least help me out. What did I forget to do? And he said, well, he goes, I sat there and listened to you. He said, you put forward these great ideas. I love your leadership skills. He says, all really good. He said, but you never asked me for my vote. He said, I was waiting there till the very end of the thing for you to ask me for my vote. And you never asked me for my vote. And I said, okay, can I have your vote? He goes, too late. So this is an older guy in his 80s. And I said, what do you mean too late? It's August. You're not voting until February. Come on, give me another chance. And he said, all right, listen, here's what I'll do. He said, I'll come to another town hall meeting in the future. I'm not going to tell you when I'm coming. And he said, but I'm going to wait to see if you've learned your lesson. And if you have, and you ask for the vote, then I'll consider it. And I said, all right, fair deal. We shook hands. And he turned his back, he walked away. He took like 4 or 5 steps away. And then he turned back around and looked at me and goes, and by the way, son, that's the way we do things in New Hampshire. I hope he's been back, I really do. But here's the thing, you folks are great, and you're also incredibly courteous people. I joked that we only need 1 rule in the town hall meetings rather than 4 in New Jersey. You folks are really wonderful, and I appreciate it. And one of the courteous things you do, and I'm sure this isn't like the voter guide that Jennifer puts out to all Republicans in New Hampshire, the secret voter guide that candidates don't get to see, that one of the things they tell you to do is say to every candidate, welcome to New Hampshire. Because you all do. You'll say, welcome to New Hampshire. Thank you. It's good to be back in New Hampshire. Then, in the beginning, you'd all say to me, and Governor, you're in my top 3. You all say it. Don't act like you don't say it, because you've all been saying it to me. You're in my top 3. Now, in July or August, when there were 17 people, I'm thinking, I'm going home to Merrimack going, we're doing great. I'm in everybody's top 3. Little did I know you say that to everyone, right? So now here's the thing. We're 5 weeks away. 5 weeks from the New Hampshire primary. I'm really, really flattered that I've been in your top 3, but enough, people, okay? I am not here putting it out there like this because I'm happy to be in your top 3, because here's what you all know. You only get to vote for 1. So now with 5 weeks to go, I'm not only asking for your vote, and I am. I want your vote. I want your vote on February 9th. I need your vote on February 9th. And I'm going to work hard to continue to earn your vote on February 9th. But more than that, I want you to know that being in the top 3 doesn't do it for me anymore. I got to be in the top 1. This is what we're looking for now. And so I will tell you that in the last few weeks, Mary Pat and I, and we've been up here, lots of people have been coming up and saying to me, okay, all right, you're in the top 1 now. Or they leave the room discreetly, and then I know I don't have them. So it's a good test tonight. I want you to know, I want your vote. But I want more than that. I'm going to be greedy. I not only want your vote, I want your trust and your confidence too. See, your vote will get me to the White House, and that'll be great. But if I don't have your trust and your confidence too, then I'm not going to be a good president. Because there are going to be really tough things I'm going to have to do. Really tough things to get this country back on track, to clean up this mess that Barack Obama has left us. And if I don't have your trust and confidence, I'm not going to be able to do those tough things. And we'll have another disappointing presidency, an even angrier and more dispirited population. And we can't have that. Our country deserves better than that. So if you're going to give me your vote, I want your trust and your confidence too. Because that way, with your trust and your confidence, I'm going to be a good president. And we're going to get things done that we need to get done, that we wait much too long to get done. And so I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. And I want to let you know, this experience in New Hampshire continues to be one of the most uplifting, fun experiences I've ever had in my life. You folks make everybody believe in democracy again in this country, and I can't thank you enough for it. We'll see you again really soon.